In activity 2, it asked us to continue activity 1 by running the simulation model 1000 times. What we did exactly so far, according to the previous videos. Okay, in activity 3, it asks us what is the average number of guests the wedding planner should expect. Okay, since we have done the wedding simulation 1000 times, of course, now we can calculate the average of those 1000 simulation and see what is the average of guests the wedding planner should expect. Here we have the simulation model, and here we are going to calculate the average. Okay, and I'm using the average function. L3 toward L1. Okay, and the average that we come up with is something like this. And I'm running it many times. And you see something 134, 134, 134, 134. You see, it is repeat itself, and you should, if you have followed the same structure, you should have come with the same numbers. But here you may ask, okay, it is the average number of guests the wedding planner must or should expect. But you may ask, is it the best number for preparation? We need to talk about it because it is the average of people who are coming to the wedding. Absolutely, there is a good chance that the number of people who are coming to the wedding are more than 134. And as you can see here, we have 145. So in this situation means that you are not prepared for 15 guests. Here we have 170, and it means that we are not going to be prepared for 36 guests. So when you are going with average, you are going to handle, and you have a good chance that you covered all of them. But remember, you are doing on average. For example, in a class that after grading, there is grade of, for example, 97, and also there is grade of, for example, 40, and the average is, for example, 80. It doesn't mean that average covers all the grades. No, it is just the average, and about the average of people who are coming to the wedding. Of course, there is a good chance that the number of people who are coming to the wedding are smaller than the average, 134, and also the other scenario could happen. So what do they do in this situation? Here it is another talking about probability, and if you remember, at the first session we started doing some general reviews regarding simulation. We covered this topic, but I didn't cover it directly in the class. I shared a video with you, a YouTube video with you, and it was about maintenance, and it says that, for example, we won't have the probability of 90% that we will be fine, for example. So let me tell you, this is gonna be like this. You have now the average, okay? When you have the average, usually because it is average, not always. They say, okay, since the average is 135 and we assume that it is something symmetrical distribution, there is a 50% chance that your preparation would be more than necessary and enough. And also there is 50% chance that the number of the guests that are coming to your wedding is greater than 134. There is a good chance because you are doing an average. You are not going, for example, for the chance of 75%. When you go for average, you are doing the chance of 50%. So there is a good chance of 50% that the number of people who are coming to the wedding are more than your preparation. So there is a high chance that you will be short in your inventory. And also there is a 50% chance that you will be high on your inventory. Okay, we can do all these calculations here, but let us continue with the activities because over there we have some activities regarding this question that I just mentioned. Activity 4, and the point that I mentioned just recently. To be accommodating hosts, the couple has instructed the wedding planner to use the Monte Carlo simulation model to determine X, the minimum number of guests for which the caterer should prepare the meal so that there is at least a 90% chance that the actual attendance is less than or equal to X. So it is exactly the point that I mentioned. For example, if we assume that the probability distribution is something like this, and here we have the average. If you, and let's call this be that 135 that we talked about, if we determine the number of guests is 135, so there is a 50% chance, as you can see here, that the number of real guests are higher than that. But as you can see, they want the minimum number of guests for which the caterer should prepare the meal be determined in a way that there is at least 90% chance that the actual attendees is less than or equal. So it should be, because if we attend the 135, there is 50% chance that the number of attendees is 135 or less. So it should be something, for example, like here, and we determine it like that. I don't want to involve you in the statistical calculation of that, but we are going to review some practical ways to decide about that number. Because if we want to do those statistical calculations, we need to go for the average, and after that we go for the standard deviation. We have 2, and they are the standard deviation, and we should find the number here that the probability of here is 95%, and after that, according to mu and this sigma, that's our standard deviation, we can calculate the X in a way that the probability that the number of guests are equal or less than that number, that is X, is 95%. But as I told you, I don't want to involve you in that statistical calculation. I shared with you the video that is talk about these things, so if you are interested, you can reach out to me and we can have a Zoom meeting together or in-person meeting together, and I can explain those things together, especially if it is something that you are using in work, or you have always been curious about that how to do those calculations. Absolutely, I would be very happy if you reach out to me and ask for such meetings and questions. But generally in this class, I'm not gonna cover that topic because here we are not doing a statistical class. Here we are about simulation, and we just want to focus on that sweet technique in decision making, in decision science, and just be able to review more and more cases regarding the simulation. But we are gonna try to answer this question in a practical way together through the Excel file that we have. To answer that question in a simulated way, in a practical way, I consider such a structure. Again, feel free and feel comfortable to consider other structures that strikes your mind. But here I have considered these things. I considered some numbers. For example, here they are prepared for 100 guests. They are prepared for 100, 110, 120, and it continues until 180. And here we are going to calculate the probability that the number of guests are smaller than 100. Calculate the probability of the fact that the number of guests are less than 110, 120, and like that. And I put the name service level for that. And what would be the source of our calculation here? How we calculate the probability that the number of guests are less than 100, and we are going to stop when the number is 90%. Okay, so we are going to calculate it in this way. We are going to check according to this 100, if the level, if the preparation is for 100 guests, so if the number of guests, real guests, are 90, it means that they are completely covered. But for many cases, they are going to be more than 100 guests. So we want to see what is the probability that the number of guests are less than 100 according to 1000 simulation that we have. For example, here you see in the 20th wedding, the number of guests is 85. So we want to see how many of the cases are like that. Oh, really? There are also the number of cases 25. Just imagine what would happen. All of those people are going for that improbable, rare situation, and they just encountered 25. That's the reason we need to run simulation models for at least about 1000 times. Here we put the formula that we are gonna do the formula count if. So we have that, and the range we are gonna use is H3 to H1002, and it is, as you can see, it is the column about the number of guests, and it counts for us, and the measure and the criteria is equal or smaller than M3. And I just gonna freeze this part and this part. Okay, here, for example, it says that if we put 100 as the amount and the average is 136, 82 case out of 1000 case, the number of guests would be smaller than 100, and for the rest the number of guests would be higher, and it would be a terrible service level. Let's check it for these ones and see. For example, it is interesting to see if you prepare yourself for 180 guests, 998 cases out of 1000 cases would be, the number of guests would be smaller than 180. So as you remember in the question, it is asking you about 90%. So think about it.